Remember, there's only room for one sovereign at a time, not two. So you can't be the same as the sovereign.
The metaphorical rug can be pulled from under your feet quite quick at any point. You maybe think to yourself, it won't happen to us. But when it does happen to you, yeah, then it takes you into some pretty not great places.
Palace life might look polished on the outside, but even the strongest traditions can crack when pressure hits hard. Word inside the royal household says Queen Camilla was floored after whispers spread that staff straight up refused to serve on Catherine's behalf. That kind of pushback almost never happens in the monarchy, and it's already stirring questions about loyalty, respect, and what kind of divisions are growing behind those heavy palace doors. So what pushed palace workers to take a stand this bold, and how will this kind of rebellion hit Camilla's reign?
The solutions are out there. There is real solutions to these problems.
Buckingham Palace, usually known for its tight rhythm and perfect control, suddenly feels like it's slipping into chaos. Camilla is right in the centre of a storm nobody saw coming, and insiders say it looks nothing like anything modern royal history has dealt with. What started as quiet hallway whispers has now blown up into open resistance. A staff mutiny, slow and steady but loud in impact, is shaking the monarchy from the inside out. Servants once known for automatic loyalty are quietly pulling away, refusing to serve the Queen Consort, and the rebellion isn't slowing down one bit. People close to the royal machinery swear this isn't random at all. They claim it's a reaction to what staff describe as deliberate humiliations aimed at Catherine, Princess of Wales.
You maybe think to yourself, it won't happen to us. But when it does happen to you, yeah, then it takes you into some pretty not great places.
And these aren't little slips or misunderstandings. These are repeated actions that left wounds the staff can't ignore anymore. This uprising isn't loud or messy. It's quiet, sneaky and sharp. No yelling, no marching. Just daily acts of resistance. An attendant who used to rush to Camilla's side suddenly steps away right as she reaches for her glass. A long-time butler slips out of sight the moment she enters a room. Doors expected to swing open instantly stay shut for a few awkward seconds. Afternoon tea comes late, evening wine doesn't show up at all, and tasks usually done with military precision suddenly drag or get forgotten. In a world where timing is everything, even a 10-second delay carries meaning. These little moves aren't accidents, they're signals. It's a rebellion of 1,000 small cuts. A former footman explained, still speaking with friends in service. One slip won't get you fired, but when dozens do the same thing, the message is loud. Respect is gone, and without respect, she's got nothing. Whispers floating through kitchens, hallways, and servant quarters show how deep the frustration goes. Some maids quietly talk about a betrayal that can't be forgiven. Footmen call the Queen Consort's behaviour toward Catherine beyond redemption, and even veteran attendants, people who survived brutal royal scandals from decades past, say this moment feels completely different. One older family member reportedly said in a firm whisper, "She crossed it with the princess. There's a line you cannot cross." That line, usually silent and sacred, has been broken, and everyone in the palace gets exactly what that means. No staff member needs to explain the details. They all already know. The episodes involving Catherine don't get discussed out loud, which only makes their weight heavier. It's like everyone shares one giant secret that signals something in the palace has snapped beyond repair. Senior aides admit operations are stalling. Tension is thick, trust is fading, and the royal family is dealing with one of its worst internal disasters in years. How did one act of humiliation explode into whispers about the monarchy's survival? Something fragile is hanging by a thread, and everyone feels it. Stay tuned. Now let's get into it. Because to understand why palace staff turned this fiercely against Queen Camilla, you have to look past the polished royal smiles and dig into the incident insiders call the breaking point. According to them, everything shifted after a calculated humiliation directed at Catherine, Princess of Wales. For years there were whispers, rumours of cold tension, stiff smiles, and quiet rivalry between the two women. The tabloids tried to brush it off, but insiders say the truth finally broke through during a private supper meant to show family unity, and it turned dark fast. From the start, Camilla's tone was sharp, almost icy. What started as light criticism about Catherine's duties turned into harsh jabs at her past and her place in the royal structure. Witnesses swear the remarks weren't slip-ups. They were timed perfectly to shame her in front of courtiers and family members. People outside the dining room said voices were raised, Camilla sounding cool and cutting, Catherine sounding shaken and confused. When the confrontation ended, Catherine walked out pale and visibly shaken. A personal aide later shared that the princess left the room in tears, something extremely rare for her and shocking to anyone familiar with royal pressure. To those who saw it, this wasn't a disagreement. It was a public wound meant to hurt. One insider didn't sugarcoat it and called it a planned, intentional humiliation. They said the goal was clear: remind Catherine of her place, weaken her confidence, and assert Camilla's position in front of everyone. Several witnesses said Camilla delivered one of her sharpest remarks when she suggested Catherine's status was temporary, tied only to Prince William and not any merit or lineage. The sting hit hard because it echoed old insecurities once used against Princess Diana, wounds the palace has tried to bury for decades. For Catherine, who spent years building her role with grace, patience, and public respect, the hit felt especially cruel. Many staff members quietly agreed this wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was a battle over the future tone of the monarchy itself. Camilla, determined to stand as the firm matriarch, seemed to view Catherine's growing popularity as a threat instead of a win for the family. Every glowing headline about Catherine, every warm crowd reaction, Camilla allegedly saw it as a challenge, not a blessing. The final spark came with whispered claims that Camilla wanted to take away a symbolic title linked deeply to Princess Diana, something many palace workers saw as crossing a sacred line. This was never about manners or protocol. It felt like an erasure, a quiet attempt to rewrite history so Catherine would never outshine her. To many staff members, especially those who still carry deep respect for Diana and see Catherine as her natural successor, this didn't look like palace politics. It looked like sacrilege, and people kept asking the same burning question. Why would Camilla ever dare challenge Diana's memory through Catherine? Was this ambition or flat-out desperation? Stay right here, because what came next ripped open tensions the palace could no longer hide. At first, insiders say Queen Camilla tried to pretend the slow staff rebellion wasn't happening. She brushed off the missed tasks, ignored the hesitant bows, and treated the delays like minor annoyances. But as the pattern grew clearer, she reportedly snapped. Senior aides were ordered to track down the disobedience immediately. Names were checked, departments combed through, lists created in cold detail, and blame began racing through the palace like wildfire. Camilla made it clear, anyone caught refusing orders would face harsh punishment, up to dismissal. But instead of stopping the rebellion, those threats made it stronger. Staff already hurt by her treatment of Catherine took the warnings as proof that fear, not respect, guided the Queen Consort's rule. The more she pushed, the more determined the revolt became. A tense meeting with senior domestic officials reached a boiling point. Witnesses said the scene was filled with raw frustration. Camilla furious, slamming her hand on the table, accusing workers of betrayal and disloyalty to the very crown they served. The outburst was so intense, it rattled even her closest aides. People who were in the room said this was the moment her calm cracked completely, revealing weeks of built-up panic as her grip on control slipped. And it didn't stay private for long, because a covert audio recording of that tirade somehow leaked straight to journalists. Within hours, headlines screamed about a royal meltdown. Clips of her raised voice spread fast, and the palace suddenly found itself exposed under a harsh, humiliating spotlight. The leak flipped everything. What had once been just whispers among staff became a full public disaster, making the monarchy look fragile at the worst possible time. That's when Prince William stepped in. For weeks he had stayed silent, watching the tension build like storm clouds around his wife. But seeing Catherine publicly humiliated and loyal staff threatened was the final breaking point. Insiders say William finally snapped. According to people close to the situation, he barged straight into a private meeting where Camilla and her advisors were gathered, anger sharp in his footsteps. "Explain yourself," he demanded, voice firm but controlled. "Why have you been so cruel to Catherine?" Camilla defended herself by claiming her actions were necessary, insisting everything she'd done was meant to protect the monarchy's order because she believed Catherine had grown too influential. But William wasn't buying it. He called her behaviour what he believed it truly was, cruelty hidden behind the excuse of protocol. His anger wasn't only about the attacks on his wife. He was furious about the danger facing the staff who had stood by her with quiet loyalty. The argument escalated fast. When Camilla insisted she would not be pushed aside or overshadowed, William's response reportedly hit like a strike to the heart of the room. He reminded her of Princess Diana, his mother, and the pain she had endured inside the same institution. The comparison froze the entire room. In a low, blazing voice, he warned, "Don't let Catherine suffer the same fate." Then came the line that changed the energy inside the palace entirely. "No one will disgrace my wife and walk away unpunished." Those words reshaped the mood behind the palace walls. What began as quiet refusals by a handful of staff now carried the force of a moral stand and the silent backing of the future king. The leaked recording, the headlines, the private fury, the prince's vow, all of it pushed the crisis into a new, dangerous territory. Decisions were no longer happening quietly. Every move became a test. Who would the palace truly stand behind? Now, with loyalty fractured and silence speaking louder than crowns, everyone wondered, whose side would history show the palace really served? Stay close, because this crisis didn't explode overnight. The so-called palace revolt didn't come from nowhere. It wasn't a random burst of anger or a rebellion created by a single argument. Its roots stretched back more than a decade, watered quietly by Catherine's own way of living within the royal machine. In Buckingham Palace, staff are trained to be invisible. Their personal lives get tucked behind protocol, and their stories often go unnoticed. But Catherine had always been different. She remembered names, not just titles. Butlers, maids, gardeners, drivers. She stopped to ask a tired chef how his children were doing after a long shift. She praised young cleaners who polished the palace floors long past midnight after big banquets. None of this was for cameras. None of it was rehearsed. These moments were private, sincere, and deeply appreciated by the people who rarely receive attention. Stories of her kindness became treasured whispers passed among staff. When a junior maid fell seriously ill, Catherine quietly arranged for warm soup from the royal cook to be sent to her room, along with a handwritten note filled with comfort. When a footman lost his father, she didn't just offer a formal condolence. She wrote directly to the family herself, expressing true sympathy, a gesture that moved them to tears. In a world where distance is expected, Catherine's closeness mattered. "That kind of thing just doesn't happen," an ex-footman said. "We serve them, not the other way around. When someone like her notices your life, your struggles, it builds a loyalty you can't command." By contrast, Queen Camilla was seen in a very different light. Insiders described her as distant, sharp, and at times openly unkind. Where Catherine eased burdens with warmth, Camilla was known for snapping, scolding, even belittling staff over tiny mistakes. The comparison was impossible to ignore. Everyone inside the palace understood there was a rift between the two women. But when stories of Catherine's quiet compassion continued spreading among staff, the divide grew sharper. What had once been a matter of duty slowly transformed into a question of allegiance, and the royal household knew exactly which direction their loyalty leaned. Tradition demanded that palace staff serve the crown, no questions asked. But this time, tradition cracked. Many could no longer see Camilla as the living embodiment of the monarchy. Instead, instinct took over. They turned toward Catherine, the woman who seemed to carry the monarchy's true spirit for the first time in modern memory. Loyalty inside the royal household had shifted away from the throne. Staff didn't see their defiance as betrayal. They believed they were protecting the dignity and future of the monarchy itself. In their hearts, they had already chosen Catherine. She wasn't just Princess of Wales. To them, she was the Queen of Hearts. But how does a silent rebellion inside gilded palace walls crown Catherine as the chosen Queen of Hearts? If the private supper was the spark, then what followed became an explosion that rocked Buckingham Palace from the inside out. Quiet whispers and subtle gestures of defiance were one thing, but when the world was watching, the fracture could no longer stay hidden. The consequences hit fast. It happened at a glittering diplomatic reception, one of those perfectly choreographed events where every smile, handshake and toast is meant to show unity and British power to the global stage. Golden chandeliers cast their glow across the grand hall. Foreign dignitaries, ambassadors and senior officials mingled in flawless formality. On the surface, everything sparkled, but in a single moment the illusion cracked Witnesses recall Queen Camilla approaching Catherine with precise, deliberate steps. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her words, though softly spoken, cut through the polite hum of conversation like a knife. What she said remains under wraps, hidden by palace officials desperate to suppress it, but the effect was undeniable. Catherine, poised and graceful just seconds before, froze in place. Her eyes widened in shock. Her composure cracked in front of an audience of global power brokers. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversations stalled, laughter faded, and the air grew thick with tension. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, each fully aware they had just witnessed a rupture in Britain's most sacred institution. It was terrifying. One attendee quietly admitted afterward that the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Staff who had long admired Catherine's quiet strength couldn't bear to see her targeted so openly. They were used to her calm under pressure, her grace in the face of scrutiny, and this blatant strike was too much to endure. As she stepped away from the reception, pale and shaken, a small group of aides instinctively formed a protective shield around her. Their words, whispered but unwavering, carried more weight than any public statement. "We are with you, Your Royal Highness. You are not alone." That brief, raw moment changed everything. The bond between Catherine and the staff went beyond formal duty into something deeply personal. Professional loyalty transformed into allegiance fueled by compassion and conviction. Behind the scenes, palace staff scrambled to contain the fallout. Photographers were told to lower their cameras. Footage was seized or buried. Press releases painted the evening as a stunning diplomatic triumph, but insiders knew the truth. Camilla's cutting tone, Catherine's visible distress, and the silence that followed couldn't be erased with spin. Prince William's response was measured in public but scalding in private. Those close to him said his voice trembled with fury as he told advisers that Camilla had crossed a line that could never be forgiven. This wasn't just an insult to his wife, it was an attack on the crown's future. His private vow was chilling in its clarity. That humiliation would not be forgotten, and it would not go unanswered. But what did the staff's silent defiance mean? Loyalty, rebellion, or destiny? Perhaps all three. One thing was certain. The monarchy's future was being rewritten in quiet gestures that carried louder meaning than any public decree. As the palace storm grew, the effects could no longer be contained behind gilded gates. Whispers of discontent spilled into the open, catching the attention of international news outlets. The idea of a mutiny inside the royal household was explosive. The global press seized every detail. Rumours turned into questions about the stability of the British monarchy, and the timing couldn't have been worse. King Charles, weakened by ongoing health struggles, had stepped back from many duties. His absence left a gap, and silence deepened the impression that the crown itself might be faltering. Commentators described a monarchy without a clear voice, adrift while the world watched. For the first time in decades, the monarchy looked fragile, leaderless, dangerously close to unravelling. Diplomats whispered among themselves, concerned that Britain's symbolic heart, its monarchy, was in turmoil. Reports spread that staff were refusing to serve Catherine. Camilla's outbursts, combined with William's interventions, painted a picture of a royal family in open conflict. Centuries of carefully curated prestige suffered sharp blows. What was once a symbol of continuity and strength now looked fractured and unstable. Amid the chaos, Catherine chose a different path. Unlike Camilla, whose anger dominated headlines, Catherine remained silent. No statements, no defences, no arguments. But that silence was far from weakness. It was a shield. Her calm composure in public humiliation became its own power. Observers drew stark comparisons. On one side, Camilla, fiery, defensive, consumed by palace battles. On the other, Catherine, steady, controlled, and seemingly untouched by the chaos. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Camilla's temper alienated the public. Catherine's quiet strength earned admiration. Her silence wasn't emptiness, it was strategy. A woman carrying herself with dignity, even as the forces within her own household seemed aligned against her. The people responded instantly. rallying around a princess who endured without complaint, who every day remained composed no matter the storm. Her popularity surged while Camilla's position felt more and more isolated. What had started as a domestic dispute had now grown into a global reckoning with the fragility of the monarchy itself. The world was watching, every move dissected, every gesture analysed, and Catherine's quiet resilience became a symbol of something bigger than herself, a monarchy at a crossroads. The story was no longer just about staff refusals or whispered clashes behind closed doors. It was about the crown's very image, a battle between two women at the heart of the monarchy, and the shocking perception that Britain's oldest institution was teetering on the edge. And then, what happens when a single letter, echoing Diana's pain, threatens to unravel royal power before the eyes of the world? The palace walls, once sacred and unshakable, now seemed fragile under the weight of truth. The letter that changed everything emerged just as it seemed the palace crisis had reached its breaking point. A private letter, written in Catherine's own hand, surfaced, uncovered by an unknown figure. It had never been meant for public eyes, yet its discovery shook the palace to its core. Every word carried the quiet authority of someone who had endured years of scrutiny, yet refused to be broken, a force of calm strength that commanded respect silently. Passed quietly to senior officials, then shared among key members of the royal household, the letter stripped away the last threads of authority Queen Camilla thought she held. What stunned readers was not its bitterness or accusations. Instead, it was deeply personal, a window into Catherine's quiet suffering. The words were intimate, piercing, and impossible to ignore, carrying a weight that reverberated through the corridors of Buckingham Palace. She spoke of loneliness, of the immense strain of carrying herself with dignity while facing hostility from within her own family. The words that left the deepest mark were not political, they were human. I only ask for the respect and dignity that everyone deserves. I only want peace inside these walls. The honesty was raw, unfiltered, and impossible to dismiss, making everyone who read it pause and reflect. The reaction was immediate. Staff who had long admired Catherine were left in tears, overwhelmed by the honesty of her plea. Many drew chilling comparisons to Princess Diana, who decades earlier had written her own anguished words from behind palace walls. Catherine's letter was more than a cry for peace. It was history repeating itself, and this time they were determined not to let it end the same way. For Prince William, the discovery hardened his resolve. Protecting his wife was no longer just loyalty. It had become duty. The rebellion that had begun in whispers was now impossible to contain. And so, the climax came not in secret corridors, but on the world stage. Every eye was on the palace, and every heartbeat in anticipation of what would come next. It happened at a grand state banquet beneath glittering chandeliers, a night meant to project unity and strength before foreign dignitaries. The palace revolt reached its peak. Queen Camilla, standing at the centre, sought assistance to complete a centuries-old ritual, and nothing happened. No attendants moved, every second stretched like an eternity, the silence more powerful than any shout. The silence was deafening, a refusal stronger than any shouted protest. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they had witnessed history. Footmen froze. Aides averted their eyes. Queen Camilla stood exposed, alone. That chilling pause transformed the banquet into a public reckoning, proof that the rebellion had burst from the palace walls into full view. And so, when silence replaced loyalty at the grand banquet, was this the night the monarchy's foundation cracked forever? The crown trembled. Not a single figure stirred. Footmen stood frozen. Attendants fixed their gaze forward. An almost unbearable stillness filled the grand hall. Every moment seemed suspended in time, the weight of history pressing down. Then came a sound, a horrified cry echoing off the high ceilings. Queen Camilla found herself exposed, standing utterly alone. Her staff's refusal was no hesitation. It was a declaration, silent, thunderous, and absolute. The magnitude of the act reverberated beyond the hall, leaving no doubt whose side the household had chosen. Moments later, the heavy doors swung open. Prince William entered, Catherine at his side. They moved with quiet authority, unshaken, steady, almost immovable, like a wall of calm in a storm. Every step shifted the room's balance. In unison, the staff lowered their heads in reverence. a gesture louder than words. In that precise instant, a new path revealed itself. The household's loyalty was clear for all to see, no words necessary. Catherine commanded the respect of every soul present. Her silence was her power, her dignity, her weapon. And as she stood unshaken, Camilla remained stranded in isolation. Every heartbeat, every glance confirmed the shift in power. Witnesses later described Camilla's expression as collapsing under the weight of realization. Her face showed defeat. For the first time, she seemed to understand the battle was lost. She faced not just Catherine, but a wall of staff who had chosen their allegiance. A stepson standing firmly with his wife, and a monarchy moving forward without her. The crown she had chased with such determination now felt hollow, stripped of reverence she once believed it carried. The rebellion did not end with proclamations or commands. It ended with a far more devastating truth, silent, undeniable, and complete. At the very heart of Buckingham Palace, a decision had been made. Not by decree, not by announcement, but by the quiet will of those who served. It was Catherine who was chosen. She embodied the dignity, compassion, and quiet strength the monarchy truly needed. And for Queen Camilla, the wounds carved by her own actions could never heal. So what do you think? Was this the moment Catherine truly became the people's queen, leaving Camilla powerless? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. This is history unfolding in real time, and everyone watching the palace knows the story has changed forever.